Hi everybody, and today I gotta do another reaction video. I already did about the traditional Catholic iceberg. Catholic iceberg. Wow, I can't speak today. Traditional Catholic iceberg. Thank you. And this is another YouTube channel who is not a Catholic, who is from the Orthodox Church, and he's trying to do his analysis of Gen Z's video of the traditional Catholic iceberg. And and this YouTuber, if you somehow found this video, hi. I already did a reaction video of traditional iceberg, and if you're not familiar with that one, I did like a reading recommendation about, like, in the description, about scholarship about the origins and the early history of Christianity. Este, and maybe I will do something similar to that in this description after I finish the whole thing, and I had to go to work, so it's gotta take a while. So now we gotta see what he does about it. I gotta put captions because I don't know there's going to be copyright strike just purely by audio. So, and yeah.
Well, I went to the deepest part of that iceberg, and it leads to Orthodox Christianity. And most people in the West don't even know about Orthodoxy.
Like,
they think it's either you're a Protestant or a Catholic. When you actually look into
I
church
did a
history,
similar conclusion about, like, certain sacramental, like, different rites in the Catholic Church, that some of them are similar to Orthodoxy. So
Rome was
that.
not faithful to tradition. They propped up papal supremacy on forgeries. They added the filioque to the creed because of geopolitical reasons. The West caused the Great Schism. They were not faithful to tradition. Now, with
the problem is, like, you cannot say, like, they're not, favorite tradition. No church, like, today's Christian church, regardless of which denomination we're talking about here, is faithful to Christianity anymore. In fact, there is no Christian denomination during the first 3 centuries of Christian history that are still around today. Right there, every denomination that exists now are at least as far back as the 4th century at least, and even then they move away significantly from Jesus' teachings, because Jesus himself was a Jew who believed in the Jewish God, the Jewish religion, the Jewish prophets, the Jewish laws and the texts, and the Jewish metaphysics and theology and philosophy. He was a Jew. He never meant to establish a new religion. That was only after he died when his followers, especially Paul, who trying to convert both Jews and non-Jews into the religion, establishing Christianity, because Jesus was only one to convert Jews. It was an exclusive thing, and he believed the world was going to during his lifetime. Like many scholars, he didn't expect it to be killed. Like, he was an apocalypticist. This is an established scholarship in academia. He didn't expect it to be killed. And there is also a scholarship right now about the true Messiah. Thesis about they were meant to be true Messiah, where both Jesus and John were meant to fill that role, but because John died first, Jesus had to fill both roles, and he didn't expect to get killed. So yeah, a lot of things happen. Like I said, no Christian today follow what Jesus taught, because they move significantly from the original Jewish apocalyptic context.
Trad Catholics in the past 60 years, that's the same exact argument that they're making, is that the papacy, the Catholic Church, is not being faithful to tradition. I used to be a Trad Catholic. I know all the arguments, and I'm going to show you all the proof that you need that the Catholic Church teaches error. It has contradicted itself, but you need to submit to that, because if you don't, then you're denying Vatican I, the indefectibility of the Church, the living magisterium. That's the big problem with the Trad Catholic position, is that they are denying the indefectibility of the Church, thinking that the Church, guided by the Holy Spirit, could fall into error, that they could err in council, Vatican II. And the Trads will say, oh, it's a pastoral council, as if that gives them the right to reject a council. The Pope who opened the council, John the 23rd, is a Catholic saint. The Pope who promulgated and approved the council, Paul VI, is a Catholic saint. The Pope who lived out the council, John Paul II, is a Catholic saint. So they have made it undeniable that you need to accept Vatican II. All the popes who lived, opened, promulgated Vatican II, are saints. Unless you go the route of denying canonizations, they're not infallible. And canonizations are infallible. They are an act of papal infallibility. You can even go to Taylor Marshall talking about the logical problems if the church could err on the canonization of saints. Even Thomas Aquinas says that they cannot err on the canonization of saints. And if there's any uncertainty about Vatican II, we can look to the living magisterium, the Pope. He has said, this is a magisterium.
Well, the problem with the infallibility is impossible by nature. Any good critical thinker, regardless if you're a theist or atheist or agnostic or theological nonconformist, to do good scientific or philosophical thinking, we subscribe to fallibilism, Benasiism, which is probability, and Feodorian skepticism. We never subscribe to anything infallible because it is nonsensical. It leads to many paradoxes, like the omniscient paradox. What does God suddenly that is unknown to itself?
The council is a magisterium of the church. You are either with the church, therefore you follow the council, or you don't follow the council, and you interpret it in your own way. Then you are not with the church. The Novus Ordo reforms, which are now the liturgy at 98% of Catholic churches, besides the Eastern rites and a few traditional Latin Mass parishes. We can see what the living magisterium says. He says we can affirm with certainty and with magisterial authority that liturgical reforms are irreversible. How would it even work to get all these Novus Ordo parishes to go back to the TLM? It's never going to happen, and the TLM is being phased out. You could read Traditionis Custodes. He releases more and more documents, making it harder and harder to celebrate the TLM. He is pushing it out. The Catholic Church has a modernist ecumenical council, modernist saints, a modernist liturgy, and the only people who reject this in the Catholic Church are outside of the Catholic Church. And even the traditional Latin Mass, being Latin only, which is a common view among the trad Catholics, is a trilingual heresy. What the trad Catholics love, what I loved about the Latin Mass, was the reverence for the Eucharist. This is a place where you're supposed to worship God. It should feel like a respected and not a clown show. And that's what people like about the traditional Latin Mass. But we have that in the Divine Liturgy, in Orthodoxy. In Orthodoxy, we don't have any modernist ecumenical councils. We still have a reverent Divine Liturgy. And the Catholic Church teaches that the Orthodox have apostolic succession. We have a valid priesthood. We even have a valid Eucharist. So if the Orthodox have the Eucharist, then why do we need the Pope? Because the office of the papacy is the cause of all these problems. Vatican I, Vatican II. That is the trad Catholic's problem. The Orthodox Church has great modern saints who are against all the ills of modernity, against this false ecumenism, against this false...
Yeah, the Orthodox Church isn't the only one. Like, you even acknowledge, some Catholics already criticize of it, and many denominations outside of Catholicism and Orthodoxy reject it, although there are many reasons. Some of them are theological, some of them are political, some of them are economic, some of them are sociological, some of them are philosophical. There are many different ways to do this.
False interreligious stuff against Darwinism. They are orthodox, they are traditional in every single...
What the fuck is Darwinism? You cannot just throw that out without what I mean, because in many cases, at least on the internet, when a Christian uses the word Darwinist, it's a very rhetorical polemic meaning that can be anything, whatever they like, which is something they don't like. So, whatever this means, unless you say evolution is not true, then, whoa boy, we have a problem.
Single way possible, versus we can look at the modern Catholic saints. They are not recognizable. They teach day and night differences from what the old medieval Catholic saints used to teach, which has changed and reversed nearly all of their teachings. No salvation outside the church, except Pope Francis canonized Gregory Narek, someone who died 500 years after the Armenian split from east and west. And canonizations are infallible, teaching the Pope teaches there is salvation outside the church. The Catholic Church reversed their teaching on cremation, allowing a pagan practice. The Orthodox do not allow cremation. The Catholic Church added limbo, then they abolished it 800 years later. Immortalia Animos clearly says that Catholics cannot even participate in non-Catholic assemblies. Yet a few years later, we see
You ever heard of syncretism? That happens a lot.
interfaith gatherings. We see Francis with Fratelli Tutti having an ecumenical prayer, having a prayer to a generic creator. They built the Abrahamic Faith Center. They have contradicted their position on the death penalty, saying it is contrary to the gospel. Nearly every document of Vatican II is a departure from Catholic tradition, from Orthodox tradition, especially like religious liberty.
Like I said earlier, no Christian church today is consistent with the early church, the early history of Christianity. Those are everything is completely different. Again, go to my previous video on the traditional Catholic iceberg. Go to the description. There's the entire scholarship there. So
They, not having confessional Catholic states. The Catholic Church has basically admitted that they are wrong, that the Orthodox are correct. They have gotten rid of fasting rules. Basically, they have literally changed everything in the past 6 years. And all it takes is looking further and to see that the Catholic Church has continually innovated since the Great Schism. That's what caused the Great Schism in the first place. And Catholics cannot reject any of this. We can go.
like I said, just because they change, like religion are constantly internally diverse, always evolving. It will never be the same no matter what, even if we wanted to. Like for example, let's say the concept of hell. When we think of hell, usually like in popular mainstream discourse, we talk about like everlasting torment, right? It's an awful place, the place that let's be honest, nobody wants to go. Give it the context, right? That was first introduced in somewhere in the 4th and 5th century. So before the 4th or 5th century, the concept of hell, specifically the concept of a place of everlasting torment, was added 400 years after Jesus died. Jesus did believe in hell, but it never specified about the specifically of like internal torment, a place of torture. There's a difference. It's still a bad place, but not the extreme like severity that we see in mainstream discourse, mainstream media, a portrayal that was added 400 years after Jesus.
Go back to the sources of Catholic dogma in Denzinger, which clearly talks about again and again that the Catholic Church would never establish bad rights. That's what they said against the Jansenists. Look at these quotes from Denzinger. It is very clear that the trad Catholics are denying Denzinger, the sources of Catholic dogma, which they have no authority to do. Read specific encyclicals like Caste Connubii from a base trad pope that says that having the ideas that the faithful can just say, oh, that's just, it wasn't a ex cathedra, it wasn't a solemn definition. It says, quite the contrary, a characteristic of a true follower of Christ is to suffer themselves and be guided to all things that touch upon faith or morals, that is guided by the supreme pastor, the Roman pontiff. You need to listen to the Pope if you're a Catholic. It's very clear because of Vatican I, because of Vatican II, because of Denzinger, because of all the encyclicals, you need to listen to the Pope. You have to accept Vatican II. We can look at the people who reject Vatican II. The only group is the SSPX and Sedevacantists. Sedevacantists are outside of the church. They don't even recognize the hierarchy. The SSPX were excommunicated because their founder started consecrating 4 bishops without the Pope. The Holy See ordered the SSPX to be disbanded. Now they have their own parallel hierarchy, and they are rejecting Vatican II. They are rejecting the Novus Ordo. They are telling people not to go it. They wouldn't even receive communion at a Novus Ordo Mass, so they are quite literally not in communion with the Roman Catholic Church. SSPX members that were reconciled to Rome, the FSSP, they accept Vatican II. They accept the new Mass. The FSSP doesn't even have any bishops. They are very clear that they accept Vatican II. The highest authority in the FSSP has made it clear that they affirm Vatican II. So if you're in communion with the Pope, you have to accept Vatican II. You have to accept the new Mass. You have to accept the new canonizations. How much more clear does the Catholic Church need to make it to be that you have to accept Vatican II, that you have to accept all these changes if you're going to be a Catholic? Or you could just admit the fact that the Catholic Church has erred. Then you need to look to other churches, like the Orthodox Church, which has never erred.
What? No errors. Like, okay. We go to the North to find one of the early influential figure like St. John Chrysostom was homophobic, anti-Semitic when using the Eustachian services, used it for reading of the liturgy. Like St. John Chrysostom used anti-Semitism. In fact, the Nazi Party has used his famous Adverso Judaeos as a homilies as a way to stigmatize Jews and legitimize the Holocaust. And the Eastern Orthodox Jews for many centuries have promoted and contributed anti-Semitic programs throughout Eastern Europe, especially in Russia before the Nazis were before the Russian Revolution. And the various mutual excommunication from East and West Church, Catholic and Orthodox, when Catholics say the Orthodox, Orthodox broke away, while the Orthodox say that Catholics broke away. Or the point that one time they believed that Moscow was the third Rome and to be the center of true Christianity and expand imperialism, colonialism, slavery, and other things that we often talk about Catholicism doing. The Eastern Orthodox did the same thing. Or they claim the Catholic Church failed its promise to God, and that's why the Western Rome or the crisis of Western Rome was a predicament in order to fight Teutonic order, a medieval knight, successfully conquer many places of the Eastern Bloc territory. So, and also a history of Orthodox excommunity and talking shit to one another, or they cannot tell which council is valid and which one is not, despite a millennia trying to make their minds up. Or in political scene, the Orthodox Church, especially in Eastern Europe, has been very conservative, promoting far-right dictators, xenophobia, homophobia, nationalism, patriotism, and other such excellent things. There was like a 2005 scandal of the Greek Church that involved like something like drug smuggling and various sex scandals. Or also many of the Orthodox Church in what the Eastern Soviet countries were pro-Nazi, that Stalin started his anti-religious persecution, and then even after that he reopened the church and became allies with the Soviet Union. And even many of the important patriarchs like the Eastern Orthodox, the current Russian Eastern Orthodox Patriarch Kirill was a KGB priest, and there were many such KGB members as spies in the Eastern Orthodox Church supporting the Soviet Union. Or the Eastern Orthodox Church openly supporting the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and there were some churches that caused basically schisms or other similar incidents over fucking calendars because they use different calendars. Like, again, there's a lot of problems with that statement. There is no error.
Now I can show you his trad Catholic iceberg in my trad Catholic iceberg that I made, and then there's some specific points in his video that I want to respond to. At the top you have like normal Catholic stuff. Maybe you're a Protestant, you find out about Catholicism, you're like, wow, they have apostolic succession, they have tradition and all this, and then you become Catholic, you start looking into this, you start seeing that a lot of the online people, Brian Holdsworth, Taylor Marshall, they're talking about the TLM, the traditional Latin Mass, return tradition. You keep looking deeper and deeper. Maybe you look at 1 Peter 5, you're like, actually wrong. The modern catechism has a lot of errors. Oh, maybe there is some errors. But, the Catholic Church is still fine. Maybe you're at the FSSP, Vatican II, we can work with that, Novus Ordo, and you keep going deeper and deeper. You start learning about the John Paul II papacy and Assisi, and you're like, what the heck? Then you start getting the SSPX position, you're like, no, Vatican II definitely does contain error. And then maybe you lead to a set of
fucking commercials.
Was not in the early church. You read Denzinger, you see they changed all their teachings to triangle heresy. We see
Yeah, the church, the Catholic wasn't part of the early church, nor any Christian denomination today. Like I said, the first 3 centuries of history of Christianity, all Christian denominations said during the first 3 centuries doesn't exist anymore. With the one weird exception of Mandeanism, a Gnostic sect that originated somewhere in the late 1st century to early 2nd century. That is the only early Christian sect that survived today. The only one. Which is kind of amazing. I'm going to put links in the description about Mandeanism. I highly recommend it.
Very important councils done with no Western attendance. We see councils condemning popes, condemning Pope Honorius. We see the 5th Council anathematizing Pope Vigilius. This fact alone refutes Vatican I. If Vatican I is false, then the entire Catholic system is false. Look even deeper, the Frankish papacy.
Well, we're going to say Christianity is false because Paul, in his writing, said that there will be no split among believers. And in fact, there's over 50,000 different denominations. Yeah.
Cause the Great Schism. You find a great channel like Ubi Petrus, which talks about the deep things, the forgeries, all the problems of the Roman Catholic Church. He's an ex-Roman Catholic. You maybe find Jay Dyer. Jay Dyer is amazing. He is also an ex-Roman Catholic, trad Catholic. You find David's video, Eastern Catholic Refute Rome, saying that Eastern Catholics do all the same Orthodox things. They even venerate post-schism saints. They've been doing this before Vatican II. They don't recite the Filioque. They want to remove...
Benedict would have agreed with me. We eventually needed the Filioque taken out of the Roman Creed.
and they have all these changes, like Eastern Catholics still have leavened bread and wine. It doesn't make any sense. And then you finally become Orthodox. You see the problems in Western theology. You see that Orthodoxy is almost like an entirely different religion. I never learned about the icon veneration in the Catholic Church. There's all these things that are completely forgotten in the West. Now let's respond to some points he made in his video.
In case some of you don't know what the difference between Catholicism and traditional Catholicism is, basically a traditional Catholic, or a trad for short, is a Catholic who believes that we should be more traditional. The movement started in the 1960s when things in the church started getting weird, to say the least. Trads such as myself think that the more the church embraces the spirit of the age, the worse things will get. So the solution is to return to tradition.
The problem with saying something like that as a Catholic, saying that we need to return to tradition, what does that imply? That implies that Rome isn't traditional. And if Rome isn't traditional, then who is? Because the true faith doesn't exist outside of Rome. There's also the Mayan rite in the Roman Catholic Church. I wish this was a joke. I wish this was just some polemic, but this is a real thing that the Pope, the supreme teacher of all Christians...
It's called syncretism. We do it all the time. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, it was the 5th or the 6th, can't remember. All this depiction of Jesus is just a recreation of Hermes, but with the Christian context. I will put again in the description, everything in the description, everything, right? To understand where I'm going with it.
Has approved the Mayan rite. Is this what Jesus died for?
If you're a Catholic or go to a Catholic parish, statistically you're almost guaranteed to end up in a Latin rite church. This is the most common rite by far, but there are actually 24 rites in total in the Catholic Church. These rites look very different from the typical Latin rites. They have a different liturgy and sometimes even a different hierarchy, but they're still in communion with the one universal church under the Pope. In a lot of these cases, they look incredibly similar to Eastern Orthodox churches, with the difference being that the Orthodox churches have some theological variations and they don't accept the Pope.
Most Catholics don't know about the other rites in the Eastern Catholic churches. I thought of just being an Eastern Catholic. Maybe I'll just be a Uniate, since I really like the Divine Liturgy. But then you go there, they don't recite the Filioque, they want it removed, the Melkite Patriarch out and refused to sign Vatican I, and it seems like they've retained the Orthodox practices. It's just about submission to the Pope. It doesn't make any sense. Do whatever, just submit to the Pope. They even venerate a post-schism saint, Gregory Palamas, who's a pillar of Orthodoxy, who was not a fan of the Filioque. So how can they venerate him unless he really is a saint? And he died outside of communion with Rome. He was against the Filioque. So how does that make any sense that the Eastern Catholics are allowed to venerate him unless he really is a saint? And he is a saint.
The traditional Latin Mass is one of the cornerstones of traditional Catholicism, and it's currently under furious attack.
And it's all being done by the Pope, the clergy, the people at the top. The people are...
That's why we must abolish hierarchy. Again, I gotta put in links in the description why we should abolish the priesthood.
Supposed to be the protectors of the tradition, are the ones wrecking the liturgy and making sure to destroy any tradition that is left in the Catholic Church. If I can't even trust this church, the Pope, to maintain its own liturgy, to maintain its own teachings, why would I trust it with my soul? Why would anyone?
From a traditional Catholic perspective, it all boils down to this. The new Mass is a bad liturgy produced by 1960s clerogy.
What he just said, which is what a lot of traditional Catholics say about the Novus Ordo, is a condemned proposition. Back to the sources of Catholic dogma, Denzinger. Look at this. It's very clear. This is exactly what the Jansenists said. The Roman Catholic Church would never establish a bad rite.
Superstition materialism. If we talk about philosophical materialism, then I disagree with you there. Now, superstition, that's ironic. Every church and every religion has some form of superstitious belief throughout history. And we talk about materialism from like wealth, like hoarding yourself lavishly. Both Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic are guilty of this. So, the irony.
Even allude to that is a condemned proposition.
Wanted to try a strange avant-garde experiment, and now they're upset that the experiment has failed and everyone prefers the old Mass.
Does every Catholic prefer the TLM, or is it just people in your traditional Catholic circle? Because that's what I noticed. These traditional Catholic parishes, they do attract the most traditional people, the people who take it the most seriously, are at the SSPX or at the FSS.
It's just
Only has like a little over a million. FSSP has even less.
it's just YouTube channel.
Taylor Marshall is a YouTuber and
The
podcaster
Clown
who makes a lot
Mask.
of traditional Catholic content.
Is our Novus Ordo versus if you're Eastern Orthodox, at every single parish you get a reverent divine liturgy. It's basically like a high mass every single liturgy.
The proper way to receive communion is on the tongue. This
Yeah,
is what
this
the church
is more
still
theological
teaches,
difference,
even in
like how they do
2023.
this, and not
So
gonna
there's
care.
the obvious
you
question.
know.
This. Which one are you going to listen to? A random group of
Don't have any special charism of infallibility, and they make up, oh, it's only rare, it's only ex cathedra. They make up all these mental gymnastics, but the reality is that the trad Catholics are vindicating the Eastern Orthodox. This is exactly what they've been saying for over 1,000 years.
Oh boy, the Jesuits. But I'll keep it pretty brief because I don't want to get too far off track. Basically,
Wrong.
the Jesuits are a religious order in the church. If you see a priest with all-around terrible opinions, they're most likely a Jesuit. The ones pushing for religious indifferentism. I actually went to a Jesuit school in 8th grade. It was the University of Detroit. They taught us the usual garbage that you'd see in a conventional school, but they could get away with a lot more because they were allowed to talk about religion. One day, in language arts, they had us recite a Buddhist prayer in unison.
Sounds like the Jesuits.
Yeah, pretty much.
The third secret of
Yeah.
Fatima.
I and many people have
Fat-
noticed that
Fatima, prophecy bullshit. The miracles, the sun thing in Portugal never happened. Like seriously, a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 people in one specific area of Portugal versus 7 billion plus people saw the same thing, nothing happened for them.
Catholics literally spend so much time obsessing about Fatima and the consecration of Russia.
Extra ecclesiam nolla salus is a Latin phrase which translates into English as outside the church there is no salvation.
Rome doesn't even teach that anymore. I showed it at the beginning of the video. Rome canonized a doctor of the church, someone who died outside of the church 500 years after that church broke off the Roman Catholic Church. Does that make any sense? No.
And even then, I don't believe in the afterlife, but like, let's say there is one, for the sake of the argument. Using the studies of near-death experience and out-of-body experience and stuff like that, judging by the if we take for granted and what they're seeing is evidence of an afterlife, even though many experts come to agreement there are just hallucinations and there are just chemicals in the brain and other phenomena, no actual after. But let's say that it is. What we see throughout data is consistent with the doctrine of universalism, where everybody's safe, which is both condemned by both sides. Again, this is judging purely in what the studies of near-death experience and out-of-body experience, what they see, and see the statistic, what is the most common experience. And these, if we gotta use a Christian perspective, this, what they're experiencing, more in line with universalism than any other churches preach.
Sedevacantism is the idea that the last 6 popes, that being John the 23rd, Paul the 6th, John Paul the 1st, John Paul the 2nd, Benedict the 16th, and Francis, are all anti-popes. An anti-pope
Yeah,
cannot
that's kind of weird.
deny a valid pope. So they have to say, no, that's not a pope, that's an anti-pope. Because if it was a real pope, then they couldn't deny it. But still, it doesn't make any sense because it contradicts Vatican I because of the indefectibility of the church, because there's supposed to be a perpetual successor as defined.
The problem is, like I said, the successor, there was no established unified bishop, until somewhere between the 2nd, 3rd century. So there was no unifying. Like the idea of a line successor to Peter is myth by scholars.
Find in Vatican I. And also, Sedevacantism, they just refer to specific canons, but again, those canons need to be applied by bishops. No one.
Not
Yeah,
only the
it-
Vatican II popes aren't valid, but also every bishop in the world.
This is just the
And they believe
website
that John Paul II
who are also homophobic, by the way. Just saying.
is an antichrist. They're literally a cult. They tell people, don't go to a Catholic church. Don't know about Orthodoxy. I didn't. I literally just thought I was Protestant or Catholic. Learn about Orthodoxy. I think I've made a solid case throughout the video.
1500.
Yeah, you did a solid case. You made that case from a theological standpoint, right? But in reality, like especially the one you say they made no error, God know you are wrong in that part. And like throughout the history of the church, They did so many bad things and promoted bad things. They used to teach bad things that nowadays they will condemn or pretend that never happened. So,
There was a codification and solidification of what we now call the traditional Latin Mass. This codification happened at the Council of Trent, which is why it's also called the Tridentine Mass. And whosoever is forced or coerced to alter this missal.
And then he brings up Quo Primum, which basically says the Tridentine Mass is forever. Okay, well, the Pope is above that. The Pope is above whatever. You have to listen to the living magisterium. It isn't up to you, the individual trad Catholic, to say, I know what tradition is. Look at, I've done my research. Look at this. They can't change the TLM. According to what? Listen to the Pope. That's what it's about. You have to submit to you have to manifest the mind and will of the Pope.
One of two popes did something they didn't have the authority to do. How can we be positive that Pius V is definitely the one who was wrong, and the Vatican II popes are definitely the ones who are right?
The entire system is a contradiction. It is a house of cards built on the papacy. It's a top-down system, and we've seen the house of cards fall.
again, abolish the hierarchy. All forms of centralized authority are bad. Okay? It is by its nature, hierarchy by its nature, patriarchal, violent, oppressive, abusive. By nature. There is reason why the oldest indigenous peoples by each continent are non-hierarchical. You had the San people in Africa, you had the Pueblo people in the Americas, you had the Aboriginal Australians in Oceania, you had the Sami people in Europe, etc.
I really like the Mr. Incredible becoming uncanny trend. It's the
I love that meme, the Mr. Incredible one. Oh god, it's so fun because you never know what the hell they're going to use as a sample. What kind of facial expression like Mr. Incredible gonna use, right? It's getting funny, especially like the very long ones, where it gets even more ridiculous. Like the facial expression, like how far can you go? That is pretty cool.
stupidest thing in the world, but
Oh gosh, you one of those people. Have you ever heard of pareidolia or hyperactive agent detectancy? That's what it is. You're looking patterns that are not there. It's like when you go to the clouds and you see, oh, it looks like a bunny. That's basically what you're doing. But in your mind, I hope you're not taking this seriously. I just hope this is just a meme you're doing. But if you think this is like a legit, this is just conspiracy theory level of reasoning. That's pareidolia. Link in the description. Again, pareidolia. You looking things that are not actually there. Our ape brains like patterns. We like to connect things. That's supposed to be Jesus. So, it's our artistic expression. We have statues. Well, I don't think it exists anymore because I'm going to mention the Notre Dame one. A depiction of Satan with a lower half body of a snake, but the upper stomach up is a woman. So, nobody's questioning that. That's pareidolia again. You're looking things that are not there. This is just conspiracy theory. I can do that to any religion. I can look in a Buddhist temple and find demonic Hindu devas in it, right? It's like, oh, they're worshipping the evil devas, or or a Muslim look a Christian and they see like evil things of the jinn, stuff like that. It's like, this is conspiracy theory. You use an image of an Egyptian god gods, demons, they're not the same. Well, depending the culture, but like it is an Egyptian god. You're using a Orientalist understanding of that image. That is an insult to the people who believe in this religion for thousands of years and thousands of years before Judaism. At least you support LGBT rights, I guess. I score your haircut. Yeah, I don't care. Yeah, fun video, but at the very end, oh man, that was just conspiracy theory all the way. Again, links in the description. And you somehow managed to find this video. Hi, how are you? I hope you have a lovely evening. And I'm gonna put links in the description. I had to go to work first, and it's gonna take a while. And I hope to see you guys next time.